How can I eat when they starve? Just think about that question for a second. It's a question that cuts through all the excuses, all the rationalizations. And it's what sent one of the 20th century's most intense thinkers, Simone Weil, on her final desperate journey. So we're going to explore the last chapter of her life. And this isn't just a story about survival. It's about a harrowing quest for a deeper truth, a quest she undertook in the most unforgiving place she could find, the Sahara Desert. You know, it all starts with this complete clash of two worldviews. Her doctor in London looks at her and says, pretty logically, you are going to die if you keep doing this. I mean, from his point of view, it's just self-imposed starvation. But Weil, she sees something totally different. For her, this is about spiritual solidarity with her people suffering back in occupied France. To eat when they were starving felt like cutting a sacred moral cord. Two ways of seeing the world, and there's just no middle ground. So what does she do? She doesn't take the doctor's advice. Not at all. She decides to go deeper. She heads for the desert. And this isn't some kind of slow suicide, you see. It's a discipline. She's not running away from her suffering, she's running right into it, head on. She wants to turn the pain and hunger into a method, into a kind of prayer. This path takes her into an environment that just strips away everything we use to protect ourselves from the world. The desert, it becomes her ultimate teacher in what she called the ordeal of the real. And the lessons are brutal. I mean, the heat isn't just an idea, it's this crushing force that makes thinking, let alone philosophy, pretty much impossible. Then the cold at night is just as absolute. The sand gets into everything, a constant reminder that your body is breaking down. She even talks about the honesty of her own smell, an animal truth you can't hide with deodorant. She's being forced to face the raw fact that her body is completely dependent on the material world. Okay, and this is where she discovers this incredible paradox. As the hunger gets worse, as her body and her ego get weaker and weaker, a new kind of mental clarity starts to shine through. She doesn't have the energy for complicated thoughts anymore, so her consciousness just becomes pure awareness. The very thing that is literally destroying her body is also revealing reality to her in this direct, unfiltered way. This leads to a huge shift in how she sees everything. Pain, whether it's the blisters on her feet or the cramps in her stomach, it stops being the enemy. She realizes that fighting the pain, that little voice in your head that says, I can't take this, that actually creates more suffering than the pain itself. So pain just becomes information. It becomes a messenger. And it's a huge takeaway for all of us, right? Learning to listen to what our pain is trying to tell us, instead of just trying to shut it up. So this physical stripping away, it paves the way for the core philosophical idea of her whole journey. She comes up with this concept she calls decreation. And get this, she approaches it like it's a kind of spiritual mathematics. And that brings up the big question for us, doesn't it? Our sense of self, our ego, it feels like the most solid, real thing in our entire universe. So how could it possibly become nothing? Well, here's her answer. Decreation isn't about annihilation. It's not about destroying yourself. It's more like a process of subtraction. It's about systematically dissolving all the false, constructed parts of yourself, the ego, the identities we cling to so tightly, to create an emptiness, a space for something else to come in. And she actually lays it out almost like a mathematical proof. It's pretty wild. You take an identity you have, like I am a philosopher or I am French. Then you realize, okay, that's not essential to who I am. So you mentally subtract it. You see what's left. And you just keep doing that, peeling away layer after layer until you get to this kind of 0 point of the self. And this quote just brilliantly sums up the goal. You're not trying to become a literal nothing, but to become like the number 0. Think about it. 0 is nothing on its own, but it's the very thing that makes our entire number system work. But becoming this receptive 0, the self stops being a barrier and becomes a channel for reality. You can actually see shades of this in practices like mindfulness, right? The whole act of watching your thoughts without identifying with them, it's about letting that ego just go. Okay, so if decreation is the internal work you do on yourself, how are you supposed to relate to the world outside? Well, that brings us to her next huge idea, giving an active yes to all of reality. Now, Weil is super clear about this distinction. Acceptance is passive. It's just sort of shrugging your shoulders and acknowledging a fact. Well, it's raining. Consent, on the other hand, is an active choice. It's an affirmation. It's choosing to embrace the rain, to align your will with what's actually happening, instead of sitting inside wishing it were sunny. It's loving the fact because it is the fact. She sees this as the ultimate spiritual practice.
And the crucial point here, and this is so important, it's not about liking what's happening. Christ in the garden didn't want to suffer. It's about consciously choosing to align your own small will with a larger reality, even when that reality is completely agonizing. It's a powerful shift from being a victim of your life to being an active participant in it, no matter what it throws at you. But as she pushes deeper and deeper, this practice leads her to a terrifying place, a profound realization. After all the stripping away, after all the consent, what she finds isn't some comforting presence, not a warm light. She finds absolute silence. God is absent. And yet, in the very next breath, she finds the incredible paradox inside that terror. This very absence, God's refusal to be just another thing in the world that you can point at, that is the nature of God's presence. God is the space in which everything happens, not one of the things happening. The silence is the message. And this brings us to the climax of her journey, the culmination of all this physical and spiritual decreation, where all the theory and philosophy just collapses into the raw, inescapable fact of dying. And it all happens so fast, her body's systems just start to fail. And then something even deeper gives way. Her hope that all this suffering means something, that dies too. She calls it the crucifixion of hope. And finally, the very structure of herself, her ego, begins to dissolve into that void she had been seeking all along. You can almost feel it in her last thoughts. Consciousness itself fragments. That solid I that narrates all of our lives, it just breaks apart into these disconnected words. The observer dissolves into the observation, until there's no difference left between the self, the void, and God. Which leaves us right back where we started, with the question that drove her entire life, from the factories of Paris to the sands of the Sahara. When you strip away every identity, every comfort, every single hope, even the feeling of being a self, what is left?